Okay, Mr. Boone.
I hereby call to order the Crestwood School Board of Directors regular meeting for March of 2021. I'm going to ask for a moment of silence after the Pledge of Allegiance in honor of recently retired Crestwood paraeducator Donna Maurer Earnhardt, who passed away this week. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the
flag of the United
States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Ms. Bibla? Here. Mr. Brogna? Mrs. McCurdy?
Here.
Mrs. McGovern?
Here.
Mrs. Spath? Hold here. I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. No one's home. Mrs. McGovern, I got. Mrs. Spath, I got. Mr. Swank.
Here.
Mr. Costello.
Here.
Mrs. Haddix.
Here.
Mr. Boone.
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you. At this time, I just would like to make a little statement here about 2 COVID-related issues. I feel a huge public thank you is due to 3 men associated with this school district: our superintendent, Robert Mahalik, our athletic director, Dean Ambosi, and our solicitor, Jack Dean. Last week, over a very anxious 48-hour stretch, they worked tirelessly, fighting for fair treatment of our student athletes, and especially for the health and well-being of not only those students, but in reality of their families, the Crestwood student body and staff, and the entire Mountaintop community. An unfortunate chain of events not caused by anyone in the Crestwood School District put these 3 men in a very difficult, trying, and unfair situation. For the second time, our district reached out to the State Department of Health for guidance and leadership. And for the second time, we were not given what was needed. It fell upon these 3 individuals to take the reins and stay the course. Mr. Mahalik stated that he aged 4 years in that 48-hour period. The public will never truly know the efforts put forth by these 3 men, the leadership they displayed, and the support they gave to our students and all of Mountaintop. I just want to publicly thank them for their efforts in serving our district and, in essence, the entire Mountaintop community. And as a second item, the administration and Scott Brummagem and the custodial staff deserve a big thank you for a job well done over the past weekend. The owners of the Crestwood Pharmacy, and I'm proud to say they are both Crestwood graduates, their staff, and all who helped and worked with the district personnel to successfully vaccinate approximately 1,000 people. I have heard nothing but praise for the efficiency of that operation. All of this to make our community a safer place. Thank you to all involved for a job well done. We had an executive session held prior to the board meeting in regards to contracts, personnel, actions, and pending litigation. I will be seeking approval of minutes of the regular board meeting of February 18th, 2021, and approval of the treasurer's report for February of 2021. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. I do appreciate the acknowledgement, not necessary, but I do appreciate that. And I quite honestly do not have 4 years to trade for 48 hours any longer. So I'm hoping we don't have those situations again. Mr. President, if I may just add to your recognition and honoring the untimely passing of such a sweet, sweet soul, Donna Earnhardt. I would just like our community to know a little more about Donna. She was a paraprofessional with our district for 25 years, and she had just retired last school year. Donna had worked in every building, and she was always serving our students with love, compassion, and laughter. Those that knew Donna well would tell you that her greatest joys were her family, especially her children and grandchildren, and the students that she worked with. You know, when we talk about every position being important in a school operation, Donna really demonstrated that. Oftentimes, we don't really maybe give credit to the role of paraprofessional, but when you understand the work that these people do and the outcomes that we have because of their efforts, it really needs to be recognized. And Donna was one of those people. And to her family, our thoughts and prayers are with you. This loss is great for all of us, but certainly we understand what you're dealing with. I just need you to know that in those 25 years, Donna touched so many lives. So many lives are better because of her. And that's quite a legacy. And that's what Donna has left here at Crestwood. So thank you again, Mr. President, for recognizing her, and to her family again. We share so hard in your loss. Would also like to congratulate the following band members for a great accomplishment that Dave recently had: Nicole McFarland, Jack Nixon, Beth Sodergren, and Kate Fenstermacher. These students have qualified for the regional competition to be coming up, I believe, shortly. I'm not exactly sure when, but they did qualify for the regional competition. Also, congratulations to Nicole McFarland once again and Kevin Chang for their participation in the District Orchestra Festival. These two will also move on to regions and possibly even qualify for states. So very big congratulations to the members of our band and orchestra for a job well done. Lastly, and certainly I'm just going to touch on this, and we'll have much more information coming up next month's committee meetings. We are, to our parents, we are putting together a summer remediation program. So certainly we are aware that some students have had a learning loss through the effects of COVID-19. So right now there are plans in place, spearheaded by Mr. Sayre, our principal at Fairview, with help with all of our principals, Mrs. Gregory, Mrs. Foster, Mr. Gorham, Mrs. Harris. Everyone is contributing to putting together a program, certainly emphasizing really K to 8, and we're going to look at our 9th through 12th students as well to see what we can do for them. But again, we are still putting together the logistics, much more in April, and we'll announce at that time all the information you'll need to know, how this may benefit your child. So with that, Mr. Boone, I thank you once again for all the support the board has provided myself and the entire district and the community. And again, for allowing that event that you talked about on Sunday to take place. It was the Board of Education that said, we certainly support this, knowing that there was so many people going to be coming to this campus. The work, the planning, was just unbelievable. And I will say that something very similar to that is also, again, being planned from the good folks at Crestwood Pharmacy. And I look forward to speaking with them and getting more information, and once again, being able to offer something like that to our community. Thank you, Mr. Boone, to the members of the board. I yield back the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Dean, Solicitor's Report.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I really want to thank you for the kind words. They were absolutely unnecessary. Bob and Dean were the real heroes there. I sort of helped them along for the ride, but credit to those guys. And congratulations to our basketball team for winning the district championship. But on a legal note, we have an upcoming professional staff arbitration this week. And I'll be updating the board and the public after the arbitration when we get the award, which won't be for several months, but we'll keep you guys updated and keep the public updated of the arbitration. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay, now our committee reports, financial planning. Mr. Swank.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. I will be seeking approval of items 1 through 6.
Video.
Transportation Committee. Mrs. Spath.
No report.
Thank you. Policy, Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be seeking approval of items 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. Human Resources, Mrs. McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. I will be seeking approval of items 1 through 7.
Thank you. Academic Programs, Mrs. Bibla. For report.
No report at this time.
Thank you. Co-curricular, Mr. Swank.
Yes, Mr. President, I'll be seeking approval of items number 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. Physical Plant and Construction, Mrs. Haddix.
No report.
Thanks. Technology, Mrs. McCurdy.
Mr. President, no report at this time.
Okay, thank you. Positive Behavioral Intervention, Mrs. Bibla.
I'll be seeking approval for item 1.
Intermediate Unit 18, Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. The minutes are on file in the superintendent's office and on the district website. The March LIU meeting is on Wednesday, March 24th, 2021 in the LIU boardroom.
Thank you. Wilkes-Barre Area Career and Technical Center. You ladies sort of keep me guessing who's going to make that report.
It's Mrs. McCurdy tonight. I do have a report. We have some really excellent news. 2 of our Crestwood students competed in the Skills USA competition last month. And we have a 2nd place winner, Alex Romanowski, in electrical construction wiring. And we had a 3rd place winner, Kayla Durr, in welding. And both of these students will be moving on to another competition. So we hope to hear some good news after that. The minutes are on file in the superintendent's office and on the district website. And the next CTC meeting is April 19th, 2021 at the CTC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on agenda items from the board or the public, Mr. Blanchard?
No, Mr. Boone.
Questions on non-agenda items from the board or the public?
No, Mr. Boone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll again do the roll call.
Miss Bibla.
Here.
Mr. Brogna. Mrs. McCurdy.
Here.
Mrs. McGovern.
Here.
Mrs. Spath.
Here.
Mr. Swank.
Present.
Mr. Costello.
Here.
Mrs. Haddix.
Here.
Mr. Boone.
Here.
8 members present.
Okay, I will be seeking approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of February 18th, 2021. I so move.
Second.
Mrs. Bibla.
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy.
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern.
Yes.
Mrs. Spath.
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carried.
I am seeking approval of the treasurer's report for February 2021. I so move.
Second.
Second.
Who is the first second? Haddix?
Stacy. Yep.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Mrs. Bibla,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
and Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Financial planning, Mr. Swank.
Yes, Mr. Boone, I will make a motion to approve items number 1 through 6. I so move.
Second.
Was that Mrs. Spath?
Yeah.
Okay. Miss Bibla,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
and Mrs. Haddix, you have to recuse yourself, I believe.
Oh, is there a number 6?
Yeah,
that
number 1, that's the one that I
Okay.
missed. Yep,
I recuse myself.
from item number
Number 1.
1. Yep.
Yes to the rest.
And Mr. Boone?
Recuse myself on check number 923 under item 1. Yes on all others.
Motion carried.
Policy, Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'll be making a motion to recommend the consideration to approve the following policies for the second reading and adoption, item 1, and for the motion for the recommend the consideration to approve the following policies for a second reading in item 2. I so move.
Second.
Mrs. Bibla,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
and Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Human Resources, Mrs. McGovern.
I recommend approving items 1 through 7. I so move.
Second.
Mrs. Bibla,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
and Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Co-curricular, Mr. Swank.
I'll make a motion to approve items number 1 and 2. I so move.
Second, Mr. Costello.
Mrs. Bibla,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
and Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Positive behavioral intervention, Ms. Bibla.
I'm seeking approval for item 1. I so move.
Second.
Was that Mrs. McGovern?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And Mrs. Bibla,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
and Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, our next scheduled committee meeting is on April 8th at 4 o'clock, and the regular board meeting will be on April 15th. They will either be held in the media center, the auditorium, or via Zoom. Hoping to be back live for some of those meetings. Nothing else at this time. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
And a second.
Second.
Mrs. Bibla,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
and Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.